Hello everyone, this is Bloody Bananas. How's it going? Welcome to another video. In this video we're going to actually talk about an issue that's been a topic that's very controversial in the Pokemon Go community. It seems like a lot of people think that there is a matchmaking algorithm, and then there are other group of people that think a matching algorithm that definitely does not exist. So in this video I just want to focus on this issue and just talk about the possibility of making an algorithm from a tech perspective and the business perspective from someone who actually works in tech, right? I also noticed that there are some content creators that think there is an existence of matchmaking algorithm. And I just want to say that this video is not directed at any specific content creator. This video is purely focused around the possibility of a matchmaking algorithm in Pokemon Go. Okay, let's get into it. Firstly, I just want to talk about my credentials. Like I said earlier, I do work in tech as a data scientist, so my job is pretty much focused around creating predictive models and also algorithms for businesses to make decisions, right? And also, as Pokemon Go player, I did get on the leaderboard, global leaderboard front page regularly for the very recent season. So as the time of making this video, I am one of the top battlers in Pokemon Go, and also I've been top 10 a couple times just in the very recent season. I'm definitely not an old-time Pokemon Go strong player, but at least in the very recent season, I've been playing relatively well. And also, I do have a master's degree from a relatively known, prestigious institution in the US. And my degree was data science, statistics, mathematics. So I do have the knowledge behind building an algorithm or a model, right? So what exactly is matchmaking algorithm? From what I've gathered, just from the people that think there is an algorithm, it seems like that they think a matchmaking algorithm is something that matches you against an opponent who brings a hard counter line versus your team in order to prevent you from climbing. And also it works vice versa. So it will match you against someone that you completely hard counter so that you don't drop as much, right? Firstly, we're just going to look at this topic from a purely business proposition perspective, because in order for Niantic to build something, an algorithm like this, there must be a return in business, right? There must be something good. There must be a very plus side for them to help the bottom line or some metric that they're looking for them to build this algorithm. And the one that is most popular in technology or gaming company is engagement. So these are some potential strategies for Niantic to think about that they could implement in order to make people more engaged to playing the Go Battle League, right? There's a lot of internet companies are looking for this as well, just engagement, because that means your product is doing well, right? Here are some ways that Niantic could think about, just when it comes to improved engagement. First of all, just better reward structure, which is very easy to implement. And I think Niantic is trying this approach currently. As the time of making this video, Season 7 is about to start. And from the information that we have gathered, it looks like they're making the XL candies a lot more available to players from Go Battle League. So it will incentive players to play more Go Battle League in order to get those XL candies, right? So this one is very easy to implement, and this is definitely something that Niantic would think about when it comes to improving engagement, right? Next up, better game experience. This is tricky because this one is very arbitrary. Some people like the tap of Pokemon Go style of battling. Some people like the turn-based Pokemon battles. So this one is very arbitrary and it's very hard to implement, right? But at the same time, they could just make the quality of life improvements to make it a little easier for us to play, even though it's just a tap-tap version. And next up, more diversity in gameplay. This is a little less tricky. These are basically just revolved around balance updates for Niantic to make something that's not good, but all of a sudden make them good in the meta. And so this one is tricky, a little bit tricky, but it's not as tricky because it's very easy for them to just change the numbers. But then at the same time, you're making some of the players' past investments not as valuable, right? And then lastly, maybe, just maybe, matchmaking algorithm, which is very complicated and hard to build, very hard to implement. It's very tricky, right? And we're actually going to talk about why it is tricky just from a business perspective, not even in terms of technology, right? But as a business, firstly, I would definitely try the first 3 steps in order to improve engagement before even thinking about a matchmaking algorithm, right? And let's just see what are the problems with an algorithm, right? If you think about algorithm, if it just tries to prevent you from climbing or dropping your elo, then essentially it just wants you to have 50% win rate, right? And a very simplistic random matchmaking algorithm will just be 50-50 for both sides, because unless it targets a specific player, unless it wants one player to have less than 50% win rate, then all they have to do is just randomly match you against people that are on the same elo. If you're higher than where you are, then you will climb, right? And then eventually it hits where you are, where you belong, and then you will get 50% win rate once again, right? And if you're higher than where you're supposed to be, you're going to lose more than you win, and then you're going to end up lower than where you are. And then you're going to have 50% win rate. And in that case, Niantic doesn't have to do anything with an algorithm. All they have to do is do random matchmaking, and eventually they will have 50% win rate, right? And then secondly, it's very debatable if an algorithm will actually induce more engagement or frustration. Because if a player thinks that the game is actively trying to match you against someone that always beats you, then it will just induce more frustration, right? Like, I play a lot of the same people a lot as well, and every time I play them, I lose to them because I know they have a line that I cannot beat. And I know it can be frustrating, right? But I know that it's also just could be random. And to a lot of players, if I find out that I always get matched against the same player, like within the same day, who always beats me, then it will just make me more frustrated, and I will actually don't want to play the game as much. So it's very debatable if the algorithm will actually induce more people to play, or it will make them more frustrated, right? If all of a sudden they tell people that there's an algorithm, then people are going to be very frustrated and they will actually stop playing the game. So it's very debatable if it's actually going to help their goal of improving engagement. And then thirdly, this one we're actually going to talk more intensively. Well, we're going to talk more on the specifics in our later technical perspective slides. But for now, let's just say it's very resource intensive to build the algorithm. And lastly, the queue time for players will be way more than it is now. So especially for players on the top of the leaderboard, it will even take longer for them to queue up. If there's an algorithm that tries to find a team, they're going to lose to, right? So let's just talk about let's go into technical perspective, just to talk about how realistic it is in order to build the algorithm. What needs to be done in order to build an algorithm that works as intended, right? So let's just see, how do we make the game decide which team hard counters which team? A simple way to go with this is just to match against typings, specific Pokemon that beats an entire line maybe. But typing is very ambiguous because majority of the matchups are completely dependent on energy, shields, and baits, right? An example of this is if you just look at the typings, Skarmory completely hard counters Scrafty, right? But Scrafty actually beats Skarmory in the 2 shields, just going straight Power Up Punch. And that's something that this algorithm will not pick up, right? And then also Whiscash completely one-shots Altaria if it lands the Blizzard. So essentially it becomes 50-50 when it comes to Whiscash and Altaria matchup. But this algorithm will probably think that Altaria is a complete woe to Whiscash, right? So this obviously this is the simple way, but it also has a lot of its issues. And then perhaps there's a more complicated approach, right? Maybe there's a predictive model that we can build that just predicts the win probability of a match, depending on the Pokemon on each side, the player rating, and the Pokemon movesets, and also how well the player has been doing recently. Well, this one needs a tremendous amount of data and resources to build and maintain, because there's always like new Pokemon, there's always a new line that people are trying out, and there are so many Pokemon in the game, right? So the embedding it takes for each of the Pokemon will be enormous. And we heard about this algorithm since the very beginning of Go Battle League came out. So at that time, Niantic didn't have much data to work with. So I have very strong doubts that they could ever come up with a predictive model at the time. But we have heard about the algorithm since the very inception of Go Battle League, and it went on throughout Season 1 all the way to Season 6, right? And also, most importantly, it needs another layer of logic to decide when does the algorithm kick in during the matchmaking, right? If you have very high, let's say you're playing a game, okay, you're trying to find a match. Does the algorithm first find you someone that counters your line, and then it matches you, out of all those lines, it matches you against someone with a close rating to you? Or does it find someone that's very close rating to you, and then it finds if there are other players around the same rating that can hard counter your line? That is very ambiguous, and whichever way you think of those two, they all have each other. They all have issues, right? Because in a way, essentially, they all increase the queue time by a lot, because there are 2 layers of matchmaking, and even if just 1 layer of random matchmaking already takes a long time for players at the top. So for me, there seems to be like a lot of complications in order to build a very complex model for the algorithm to make a decision, right? And also, when does the algorithm make the decision? Also, when does it think that you need a hard counter, and when does it think that it wants you to counter the other team, right? Is it because you lost too much that now they want to match you against someone that you can beat, or is it because you won so much that it wants to match you against someone that definitely beats you? So it's very complicated, and it'll take a tremendous amount of resource to build an algorithm, take a lot of engineering work, a lot of data science, a lot of analytical, in order to make this work, and also on the server. So personally, I don't think, from a technical perspective, I don't think it's worth it for Niantic to build, and I also don't think Niantic has the capability to build this. At the time of making this video, I looked up their employee number, and they have less than 800 employees. And to build something this complicated, I estimate that there needs to be at least 20 or 30 people in order to build this, ranging from engineers, data scientists, also product. It's very complicated, and I don't think, just from a technical perspective, that they have the capability to build this algorithm. But then let's just look at common sense and logic, right? So there's no tech involved in these. Just about this is just purely on logic, okay? So for me, I think just from the common sense perspective, there are a lot of contradictions to the algorithm, because there are people who always get on the leaderboard in every season, right? Does that mean the algorithm prefer them, or is that they're just skilled in every season that they always get on the leaderboard? Personally, I think it's skill, because if it's if they just prefer some people to get on the leaderboard, then why are there people who got on the leaderboard first, but then they stop being on the leaderboard? And what about the players that didn't get on the leaderboard at the beginning, but then always got on the leaderboard in the later seasons, right? So it just doesn't make sense if there's like a favoritism in algorithm. Obviously, if algorithm is true, it wants you to, or it wants to happen to every player, right? But then there are players who always get on the leaderboard. So there is definitely a skill involved in this game. Even in a bad matchup, a lot of times you can win the game, right? So that's when it makes a difference for the players on the leaderboard in every season. And also, there are extremely long queue times for people with higher ratings. So does the algorithm still exist when finding a match is already difficult for players on the top? Like, I'm talking about hours. There's a time when 2-0 Butters hit like top 10 on the leaderboard. He got to legend in season 6, one of the earliest. And on stream, he waited a whole hour in order to find a single match. So does the algorithm pair him up at the same time of finding a match? So when finding a match is already difficult, when does the algorithm kick in? Does it prevent the match from happening even further? From just a common sense perspective, I don't think there's any reason to do this when people can't even find a match, right? And then let's go about the almost instant queue time for people in lower ratings. If it spends time to find a hard counter line, why are there like instant queues? When you change your line, right? When you change your line and then you hit the play button and then immediately queues you up. There's not enough time for the algorithm to kick in to find you a hard counter line, right? So that itself is also a contradiction, in my opinion. Just the existence of instant queue times. Whenever you hit the play button, it just occurs. The match gets paired up. Also, I think this one is huge, okay? There are tons of bugs are unfixed. And they're like the sticky ball problem, where when you throw the ball, it like sticks and you can't, the Pokeball, it sticks and then like you can't throw it further. It just like spins on your screen. And also there's fast move leaking issues that never got fixed. There's a ton of lag, which suggests there's a server overloads. Yep, it overloads. The server always overloads very frequently, like just with very basic game functions. So you think there could be a algorithm on top of the very basic game functions? You know, the server already is very heavy, right? Just maintaining basic games without even Go Battle League. So that is very contradictory, in my opinion, that they can implement an algorithm when their server can barely handle the game. And then lastly, all comes razor. This is a very famous rule in science that states usually the simplest theory is usually true. So what's the easiest explanation here? It's probably just 50-50%, just random chances, right? It's probably the most likely case. The Niantic wouldn't go out of their ways in order to build an algorithm when they can literally just use a random 50-50 algorithm that just pairs you up randomly. And then eventually everyone will be essentially 50% of finding a hard counter and 50% chance of hard countering the other person, right? And then let's talk about confirmation bias. This is actually a figure that was provided by PvPoke on Twitter. This is like back in February or March. But basically it just maps out a complete random chance of 50% over like 20, or in this case, 40 sets. And something in human nature tells us that a lot of times we notice the patterns that that confirm something that we believe already. In this case, if you think there's an algorithm, then during your matchmakings, you're mostly likely to notice those bad streaks, those 5 losses in a set. But you're not going to notice those times where you go 4-1 and then immediately you win 3 more games. You're not going to notice those games, even though they happen just as frequently as those hard countering losses that are happening in a row, right? This is a sample that is completely half and half, 100 bad leads out of 200 games. But your brain will more likely to receive the information about the hard countered losses, right? It's just how our brain has a tendency to notice the odds against you, but a lot of times it will just overlook the times when the odds are in your favor. So, and let's give an example, okay? Let's say you have a team, okay, in Ultra League Premier Cup. Let's say it leads with Empoleon and you have a Typhlosion safe swap. What are the chances your opponent has a lead that counters your Empoleon, and also it's a very hard counter to Typhlosion? Just assuming your opponent picks a randomly builds a team using PV Poke. Let's assume he doesn't have many resources, so let's exclude all the XL Pokemon. So when we look at the rankings, if your opponent is lazy and just randomly building a team, I doubt that he has enough resources for XL candies, right? So let's say he just wants to build a complete random team. He picks a random Pokemon from top 10 on PV Poke. So there are shadows in these Pokemon. So we'll exclude the shadows and count them as 1 Pokemon. Essentially, we're just looking at 8 Pokemon here, right, in the top 10. 5 out of these 8 matchups are hard countering Empoleon. Just looking at Machamp, Surfetch'd, Venusaur, Escavalier, Magnezone. We already have 5 Pokemon that are very good against Empoleon, almost hard counter, while the other 3 of Swampert, Gallade, and Gengar are basically neutral matchups for Empoleon. So if you lead Empoleon, essentially it's very unlikely you're gonna run into Pokemon that you hard counter. Most likely you're gonna run some fighter, you're gonna run into some fighters or something that hard counters you, right? It's very likely. And let's say they hard counter you already. What are the chances that they have a water type Pokemon in the back? If you just look at this list, Machamp, Surfetch'd, Venusaur, Escavalier, Gallade, Magnezone arguably, so maybe not 6, but 5 of those Pokemon are definitely weak to Charizard, right? You have Machamp, Surfetch'd, Venusaur, Escavalier, extremely weak. And then Gallade and Magnezone. Gallade is also extremely weak. And then Magnezone, a little bit weak to Charizard, depending on if the Charizard has Fire Spin, right? So it's very likely that if someone picks a random Pokemon from this list, that they're going to have a water type Pokemon in the back just to counter a Charizard, right? Because Charizard is extremely common in Ultra League Premier Cup. So when they have a water type Pokemon in the back, they also happen to counter Typhlosion in the back, right? So if you have an Empoleon lead and then you safe swap, you get hard counter in the lead, which just randomly is very likely from someone randomly building the team. It's very likely that Empoleon has a bad matchup in the lead, right? And then you go into a Typhlosion safe swap. Because they have a hard counter to Empoleon, that hard counter is also weak to a Charizard. So they most likely have a water type in the back, which also hard counters a Typhlosion safe swap, right? So essentially, it's very likely that if you lose the lead with Empoleon, that you're also going to lose the safe swap with the Typhlosion, right? This is just purely from random chances, right? So in conclusion, I think that building an algorithm provides almost zero business value for Niantic as a gaming company. It spends too much resources, and also it doesn't give much in return. They want to induce engagement, but if they do an algorithm, they could actually induce more frustration in the players, and in turn gives less engagement. And also it is extremely very complicated, and also there are just too many contradictions to support the hypothesis that the algorithm does exist. So personally, I definitely do not think an algorithm exists. Also, from a personal perspective, I didn't do well in the first couple seasons. I didn't actually play as much because I didn't have the resources to build the Pokemon. But also, I wasn't a very good battler. But then I started to watch a lot of the content creators, and I learned a lot from them. And that's when I started to improve. And in the most recent season, I was able to get on the leaderboard very frequently. So personally, I think there is definitely a skill involved in this game. And a lot of times, I think players think that there's an algorithm because they want to find something to blame. And they're not actively trying to improve their gameplay. But that is just my opinion. Like I said, I just wanted to give my perspective on this topic. Perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps I'm completely wrong and there is an algorithm, but just from my professional perspective, from my point of view, I don't believe that an algorithm does exist. And that is it from me. Thank you guys for watching. I know this is very controversial, but I just really wanted to give my point of view on this topic. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think about this topic as well. And I will see you guys in my next video.